We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Our opening song is number 193, Our Faith is But a Single Gem. I'd like to start today's meditation with a poem by Rilke entitled Widening Circles. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. They may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? Let's sit together in silence for a moment. Sitting up comfortably with both feet on the floor, allow the breath to drop in naturally and deeply. Eyes can be closed or cast downward with soft focus. And become aware of your breath. Feel the coolness of the air on each inhalation. And notice the warmth and quality of your breath as you exhale. Allow the air to flow out of your lungs completely. And notice there is a moment, a pause after you have expelled all of the air before a new breath is needed. With the next breath, see if you can linger in that stillness between exhaling and inhaling, just for a moment, as if time has stopped. Many believe that the stillness we experience, the pause between breaths, is where all creativity begins. All of the old has left the body, and the door is open to allow a new breath, a new life, a new way of thinking, of listening, of being in the world. The Buddhists say that we can all change our lives in the next breath. I invite us to practice this breathing for a few moments. From an early age, we learn to be right and make everyone else wrong. The need to be right is the result of trying to protect the image we want to project to the outside. We have to impose our way of thinking, not just onto other human beings, but even upon ourselves. They each carry a sign, pro-life, pro-choice. The more they argue, the louder they get. The louder they get, the more they get in each other's face. One gets hit with spittle, so the other hits with a sign. The one that gets hit gets a buddy, so the other gets two buddies. War ensues, blood is shed, crusades and jihads promising peace, but delivering blood. It all starts with the need to be right. The need to be right is a form of violence. It is often the springboard for escalating aggression and conflict. Maybe truth is a verb, something we experience, something we live, not something we know. Maybe that's what responsible means, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Learning to live truth, to experience truth, and to honor the possibility that another experience may bring another truth. To walk freely into the unknown every day with a sacred curiosity, a holy question, instead of a shield of knowledge. And maybe by aspiring to live truth, we find the deep meaning of our lives. In his essay, A Shift of Mind, psychotherapist Mel Schwartz suggests that one of the most prevalent and damaging themes in our culture is the need to be right. It's one of those essential memes that we take for granted. It is so deeply embedded in our belief system and in our collective psyche that we never even pause to consider it. From the more personal and mundane battle over who said what in the midst of an argument to the larger issues of politics, religion, abortion, healthcare, gun control, or climate change, being right is mandated. It quickens our pulse, causes us to shout, and can even sever relationships. It is the raison d'etre for most acts of hatred, violence, and warfare. Now, personally, in the world at large, I try to remember to label my own thoughts as ideas and not insist that they are the truth or that I am always right. But curiously, in my relationship with my father, I often revert to an angry, argumentative, sarcastic know-it-all that is participating in what seems like a life or death battle, a war of words aimed at convincing him to think more liberally, to watch something other than or in addition to Fox News, to please stop sending me hateful right-wing incendiary emails. I desperately want him to question his own belief, to actually form his own ideas and opinions instead of regurgitating what he's heard from one questionable source. When he spouts propaganda about our current president or immigration or who's responsible for our debts or failing schools or, I become furious and I feel compelled to change his mind. My mission becomes an obsession to set him straight. Lately, I've refused to even have discussions with him on these topics because they inevitably result in my ending the visit before I say something I might regret. Once, a few years ago, after a particularly painful discussion about religion, he actually disowned me for about a year. He told me that since I was not going to heaven, he might as well say goodbye now. Really? My partner Lynn's father, on the other hand, was so convinced of his rightness as an atheist that he constantly felt the need to ridicule, belittle, and negate Christians, often to their faces and to their very real embarrassment. Both of our fathers believed their very different spiritual and religious views to be right. It's a good thing they never met. Conversation would have quickly have devolved into ugly one-upmanship or even a fight. My father is confounded by the fact that I can have adult conversations with my friends and colleagues and disagree about all kinds of things in a mature, respectful manner, but I can't with him. He's asked over and over why we can't discuss things like mature adults. I'm sure the complete answer to that question lies in pretty complex family dynamics, issues of self-esteem, or maybe even fear of failure. But I think I now know why I become so upset by it. It may be that I view my father's search for truth and meaning as free and easy, but his approach to understanding the world is not, in my opinion, responsible. A responsible search is incredibly hard work, and most of us are not willing to make that effort. Who can blame us? There's so much disturbing news, too many issues, terrifying wars, strife, fear, hatred. There's a haunting suspicion that we have ruined our own planet and kicked ourselves out of the Garden of Eden. And we're about to face retribution either from God or from our Mother Earth. Some of us, even on our darkest days, actually believe that is what we deserve. So often, too many decide to shut down their hearts, and their search for truth and meaning becomes instead an exercise in following the smoothest, dogmatic path. I've always had this desire to oversimplify things. Until the last few years, I believe that was to my detriment. After all, I received a liberal education. I was taught to analyze, synthesize, go deeper, ask more questions, learn the facts, argue my position based on responsible inquiry. But increasingly, I think the answers to many of our problems are actually quite simple. I have begun to rely on my intuition for the answers, to feel what is true, to feel what is right. It seems so obvious that if my spiritual path causes me and others pain, anger, hatred, and disconnection, then I haven't really been exercising my right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. No one has to come up with any new answers to save the world. They've already been proposed, and most of them are quite simple. Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad had pretty much the same take, and that is to be kind, to love one another, to share, and not to worry. A simple and clear map for a way out of this madness. Gandhi demonstrated another way by committing the ultimate courageous act, to face the enemy with nothing but peace in his heart and the truth of vulnerability. You see, wars are still being fought not because there isn't a way to end them, but because we as humans, with our fears and frailties, our need to make things complicated, can't imagine a world at peace. We can't imagine a way out of the madness. We can't let go of our consuming need to be right at any cost. Of course, we all hope and wish for peace, but how many of us right now could honestly say that we have imagined a world without strife? Now, I'm not talking about some pie-in-the-sky afterlife. I'm talking about right here and right now. We are condemned to live out what we cannot imagine. And history can't help us very much because it just keeps repeating itself. We don't seem to be able to learn from our mistakes, because to learn from our mistakes, we must admit that we have made them. And that, for a culture that needs to be right, is unthinkable. So when my father goes on about those people flooding over the border illegally, insisting that most of them are criminals, I remind him of how we acquired this country in the first place. We stole it from the indigenous people. I remind him that we are the richest country on the planet. We use more resources per capita than any nation in the world, and that we have been blessed with all these riches, and maybe we should share. I then ask him the one question based on his own beliefs that stops the conversation cold. I ask, Dad, what would Jesus do? He doesn't have a comeback for that. So what would Jesus do? We all know the answer to that question, but as a Christian nation, we haven't the courage to actually practice what we preach. We know by instinct what is right, but either our ignorance, our greed, or our fear keep us from doing the right thing. I don't need to know the details about fracking to know that raping and polluting our Mother Earth is a bad idea. I don't need to know the horrific details to know that brutally slaughtering 8 billion land animals and 51 billion sea animals each year for this country's consumption alone is reprehensible. I don't need to know the details of why we wage war over and over again with the same failed outcome to know that it's probably the wrong approach. I don't need statistics to predict the cultural disaster that will follow teaching to the test and removing the arts from our school's curriculum. Our instincts and our intuition are the most valuable tools we have that enable us to freely and responsibly search for truth and meaning in our lives. We all look to experts to tell us what we already know in our hearts. By looking inward, we might simplify our search for truth and meaning. We might then have more energy to actually do something about it. The first thing we can do to help is to look at our own commitment to our fourth principle. It's one thing to repeat the words and something completely different to actually live them. If we are committed to this principle, then that means that we keep our opinions to ourselves about others' free and responsible search. But the second thing we need to do to be true to this principle is to decide when we must stand up and say enough when others' beliefs are harmful, violent, degrading, and dangerous for others. Jim Jones was very convinced that his search for truth and meaning was right. And he took 909 people, including over 300 children, with him to their deaths. We have seen the destruction caused by the fighting in Gaza, the Crusades, the Holocaust, the genocide in Rwanda, South Africa, in our own country, South, during the reign of the Klan. We have seen the destruction of payback in every major city in this country when gang members vindicate the death of one of their own by another gang. We have lost sight of what it means to be fully human, embracing all others, even when their search is very different from our own. And we have lost our courage and our voices in speaking out against truly destructive regimes intended only to control, humiliate, and implant fear. Our freedom for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning cannot mean that we become so ambivalent and uninvolved that we do not speak out when we see harm resulting from others' belief systems. We must not ever take this fourth principle to imply that we cannot speak out against religious beliefs centered on terrorism, taking each other's rights, nurturing hatred and division, and the insistence on conformity. We cannot ever allow ourselves to become so complacent in our own search that we fail to intercede when others' searches are dangerous and truly wrong-minded. Our fourth principle allows us the freedom to a spiritual path unique to us, but it does not excuse us from the responsibility of standing up for those who may be harmed terribly by the irresponsibility of those that wish to control and manipulate for their own purpose. I'd like to close this morning with a poem by Yehuda Amichai called "The Place Where We Are Right." From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. Closing song today is number 318, "We Would Be One." Stand if you are able.
Thank you.
Will you remain standing and join me as we extinguish the chalice? Please extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace.
Richard, my anxiety. Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.